If you know me, you know I love my family. I love to talk about them. I love to show pictures of them. I am so proud to be the youngest of 6 children in the Heinz family. That's the truth. But here's another truth. I also watched a lot of television when I was growing up. I mean, it was the 80s, right? There was good television. So I watched The Cosby Show. I watched Family Ties. I watched Eight is Enough. I watched so many shows with so many families. And there were times when I got frustrated with my own family and I started to think, I wish I were part of that family. And that happened the most with the Ingalls family. Do you recognize this family? If you do, you're making me so happy right now. The Ingalls family made up Little House on the Prairie. And it showed at 4 o'clock every Monday through Friday. And the Heinz girls and our mom were always in front of the television. I mean, look at this. Pa is so dear. This is actually a photo with his shirt on, which is surprising because a lot of times he was a farmer and he had his shirt off and all the moms were like, woohoo! But he was amazing and he loved his children. And there's Caroline, that's his wife, and she like journeyed through such hard times when they went out onto the prairie. And then, of course, you've got Mary and you've got Half Pint, also known as Laura, and then Carrie. And I remember watching and just thinking, oh, they've got it so good. Like the parents never seemed to fight about finances or when Pa was about to go on a big trip. And if ever there was a problem, it truly was solved and resolved by the end of the show. I wanted to be a part of the perfect Ingalls family. But I was a part of the Heinz family. I love that we're on the prairie ourselves, which really was just a slight hill out by our Fox Lake house. But here I am, of course, the youngest, right there, sitting on the rail with my turtleneck in the summer. I don't know why. And there's my mom and my dad and all my brothers and sisters. And I do love them. But man, we were not perfect. And ironically, during this photo shoot, which was done by my brother Greg in the corduroy, timers were kind of a new deal on cameras. And so he was setting the timer and then he was running into the shot, but yet looking so debonair and suave right there. During one of the shots, my brother Glenn, right here, started freaking out like this and shaking his leg. And we were so hot and we just wanted to be done. And we were like, Glenn, what is your deal? A frog had literally gone up my brother's pant leg and was climbing his leg. We fought. There were times we didn't like each other. There were times when finances were hard and my mom and dad fought before my dad would take off in the truck. And I guess I thought it was only my family, but what I've come to understand is that there's no family that's perfect. Whether they're on TV or it's your own family, there's no family that's perfect. Sometimes we feel like, okay, Heather, that might be true, but nobody's family is messier and more screwed up than my family. And it makes sense that you would think that, right? Because you see all of your family. You see your family behind closed doors. You see what is done in private. And of course, it's messy. But what do you compare it to? You compare it to other families where you only see things outside of the house or you see things that are only in public. That's not real life. That's not a real family, but that's what we compare ourselves to. So of course we think that our family is messier than anyone else's family. But the truth is, there is no perfect family. And in this stage of life where you're at, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, you're finding that to be true more than any other time in your life. Your brain, your mind is opening up to truth and to concepts and to reality like it never has before. So maybe for you, you're just sensing there's a lot of tension in your home right now. There are a lot of doors that are being slammed, a lot of voices that are being raised. Maybe even some of your family leave the house out of anger and you don't know where they go. And you can feel that tension. It is real for you. And even as you sit in your room with the door shut, trying to avoid it, you can feel it. Or maybe for you, you've discovered some not so great things about your family that you wish you didn't know. So when you were younger in elementary school, you were often shielded by those kinds of things, or you just didn't see it. But now as your mind is opening up and you're able to see more things, you start to understand that there's some tough stuff, maybe even stuff like abuse or neglect or addiction or abandonment that's happened either in your immediate family and certainly in your extended family. There's secrets about relationships or affairs or financial problems or bad decisions. And those problems cause problems in your home. Or maybe for you, there are even some serious, possibly illegal situations that are happening in your home. And man, that weighs heavy on you. And so, of course, you know your family is not perfect. But what do you do about that? Because sometimes you might get to a place where you say, man, my family is so messed up. There's no way anything good can come out of this family. Or if you are someone who believes in God and you've given your life to Him, you might even think, I can't imagine how God would do anything good through my family. And I understand how you would feel that way, but I want you to know that there's nothing further from the truth. When we look at the Bible, we see examples of a lot of families that are messed up. I mean, think about it. We don't even have to go any further than the first couple chapters in Genesis, the first book of the Bible, to find Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel. The first family messed up stuff so much that one brother killed the other because he was jealous of him. But there's a particular account that I want to focus on today, and that is the account of Jacob and Esau. So you probably recognize the name Abraham. Abraham is like the patriarch of our Christian faith. And Abraham was given a son named Isaac. Do you remember that he went up to the mountain and God asked him to sacrifice Isaac to see if he was obedient or not? And then God swooped in and said, okay, I'm so glad you're obedient, and saved Isaac's life. Well, we pick up in Genesis to the point where Isaac has had twin sons of his own, and they're named Jacob and Esau. And no two twin boys could be more different than these two guys. So as we can tell from Scripture, Esau was like a manly man, right? He could kind of like take a can of chili and rip it off with his teeth and chug it all. He loved to hunt. He loved to be out on the land. He was probably really strong, and he was covered in hair. He was a very hairy, manly man. I think we can use this picture to illustrate Esau. I mean, you can't get more manly than that, can you? And Esau was one of Isaac's sons, and he was the firstborn. And back during that time, being the firstborn was a big, big deal. Now, as his twin, Jacob came out very soon after Esau, so soon that it said that he was holding on to the ankle of his brother as he came out of the womb. And Jacob was very different than Esau. Jacob was a little bit more of a homebody. He was what we would call a mama's boy. Scripture is very clear that his mom, their mom, Rebecca, favored Jacob over Esau. And he liked to stick around the home, and he was really good at cooking, and maybe him and his mom late at night watched Hallmark movies together. Let's have this represent Jacob. Not as much a man of the land and earth as he is of the home, and exfoliating so that his skin would be smooth. And that's what the Bible tells us. Another difference between Jacob and Esau. Esau was hairy and rough, and Jacob was smooth with his skin. And so we've got these two guys, and they're living life together as siblings, which is hard enough. But then you have this idea of being the firstborn and receiving the blessing. And because Esau came out first, he was scheduled to get the blessing, which meant that all of the wealth and the property of his family would be his someday, passed on to him from Isaac. And he would actually be the conduit of God's blessing to his family as they continued to grow. It was a big deal. Well, Jacob wasn't happy about the fact that he would not get a blessing or a birthright like Esau. And so Jacob manipulated the situation and did two things. He deceived his brother Esau, and then he deceived his dad Isaac. Esau came from a hunting trip and he was starving, and Jacob had been spending time in the kitchen and he had whipped up this amazing stew, and Esau came in and he smelled it and he was so hungry and he wanted it and asked for it, and Jacob said, okay, sure, I'll give it to you if you give me your birthright, if you give me your blessing. And have you ever been in a moment where you are so hungry, you could even say you're hangry, that you would do anything to get food? That's where Esau was. And he thought, I'm going to die right now myself if I don't have food, so fine, you can have the blessing. I want the stew. But ultimately, the blessing came from Dad Isaac. So Jacob had to take it a step further. And he conspirized? He did a conspiracy with his mom of how they could trick Isaac. You see, Isaac was old, he was going blind, and they thought we can trick him. And so his mom actually gave him animal fur and hair to put on his arms and on his neck so that if his dad reached up to hug him or kiss him or reach out to feel him, he would think that he was Esau. And he entered in the presence of his dad, pretending to be Esau, asked for the blessing. Isaac, unaware of what was going on, gave him the blessing. And soon Esau found out what happened. Isaac realized what happened, and man, everything blew up in the family, so much so that Esau wanted to kill Jacob and he had to flee to go to another land. It was so messy. And you think, how in the world could God ever restore this family? How could God ever use this family for good? And the truth is, he did, because that's what our God does. He makes icky things new. He takes things that are messed up and he makes them good. And that's exactly what happened. We know this because later on in the passage, actually in the Bible, in the book of Hebrews, the author is writing and he's highlighting all of the people and the families that had been so faithful to the Lord. Some people call it the Hall of Faith rather than the Hall of Fame. And this family is noted. Check it out. Oh, actually, let me go back for a second. Esau was so distraught when he found out what happened and how Jacob had manipulated that he said to his dad in Genesis 27:38, "Do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father." And then Esau wept aloud because he knew how important the birthright was. And no wonder he wanted to hurt his brother Jacob because of all of the deception that had happened. But here's that passage in Hebrews. It says, by faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. Isn't it amazing? We know the messiness that happened amongst this family. And yet the writer of Hebrews, highlighting this beautiful family, doesn't mention anything about the jealousy, about the manipulation, about the deceit, about the murderous thoughts. Instead, it acknowledged that Isaac actually did bless both, and then God blessed those families to be great. And it says in another verse, by faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons. So now we're back to Jacob. And he worshiped as he leaned on the top of his staff. So God continued to bless and work through that family, even though they were so not perfect. I know you think your family might be a little messed up, but are you feeling a little better today? Compared to this family, you've got nothing. And yet God did great things. So where does that leave you, students? You might be thinking, Heather, okay, that's great, but I'm only 12, I'm only 14. What am I supposed to do? Well, I think the first thing is to acknowledge that you only do see your family and all of the dirt that comes with it, as opposed to how you see other families and just what's in public. So when you start to compare yourself to another family, just give yourself a reality check and say, you know what? There's so much more that goes on in that family I'm comparing my family to, that I need to be honest that they're probably messed up as well. Also, choose to believe that God is working in your family. Even though you might not be able to see it on a daily basis, God is working. And if you pray and if you look for him and his hand, you will see it. And I know that's hard when you're looking at your siblings and they're driving you crazy, but no matter what, God can and will work through your family. Also, in the middle of times when you do feel messy, stick with your family. Lean into your family. I know that your initial response is just be like, I'm out of here. And you want to go to a friend's house, you want to disengage, you want to slam your door of your room and put your headphones on, and you just want to totally detach from your family. I promise you that'll make it worse. Lean in, stick with your family. Do your best to have grace and mercy toward them, attempt to understand them, and attempt to love them well. And finally, some of you might be in a situation where to stick with your family and lean into your family might not be the best option for you. I want to be honest that if you're in a situation where harm is being done to you, there's some kind of abuse, whether that is verbal, physical, sexual, or emotional, or you are in danger, it's not a safe place for you to be, your home, I want you to tell somebody. I need you to tell somebody. Because life is not meant to be lived like that. And I want you to be safe, and I want you to be healthy. And so choose a trusted adult in your world, whether that's me or your life group leader or another staff within the junior high ministry, and let us know so that we can help. But if you find yourself in a family that's just normal, messy, I want you to know you're not alone. And I want you to also acknowledge that you take part in it, that you probably add to the mess, but that's okay. God can still redeem, and he can still restore, just like he did with Jacob and Esau. So claim that today and be encouraged. Let me pray. Father, thank you for the gift of this time. And I thank you that you are so far above and you are so much greater than our messed upness within our families. And God, I just pray that you would meet every student and every leader where they're at today, and that you would give them a vision for how you want to do good in their family, and that they'd start to see bits and pieces of that even now. And I pray all this in your son's name. Amen. Thanks for being with us, and we look forward to hanging out with you next week.